I've been paying their bills, housing their asses rent-free, and they still managed to plan a dream vacation without even a goddamn text. So, yeah, I changed the locks. Wouldn't you? It started on a Thursday night, one of those quiet, too still evenings where the air feels heavy and everything in your chest is just waiting to rise and punch its way out. I was scrolling through my phone like I always do when dinner's just leftovers and I've already poured myself a glass of something brown and a little too strong for a work night. That's when I saw it, Ben's big-ass smile on my screen, his arm around Carrie, both of them tanned, glowing like a pair of Instagram influencers trying to pretend they weren't freeloading off someone else's mortgage. Behind them, a glistening stretch of blue Mediterranean Sea and the caption, "Sunset in Santorini with the whole crew. Family time is the best time." I had to reread it. I thought maybe it was an old picture, a memory popping up, something from before. But no, today's date. The comments were all fresh. My sister Elaine had liked it. My mother commented something about how grateful she was that all her babies were together again. All of them. Except me. There it was. No invite. No heads up. Not even a half-assed, "Hey Mark, we're doing a little trip." No pressure. Just silence. For years I've let that man and his wife live in my condo, rent-free, bills on me, utilities on me. Hell, even the HOA fees I never wanted to deal with but couldn't avoid. And they didn't even pretend to include me. At first, I just stared at it. My hand actually shook. I took another drink. Then I laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh, it was that sound you make when the only other option is throwing your phone across the kitchen. I kept scrolling like some masochist, clicking through their photos. There was one of them toasting with champagne on deck, another of them in Rome near the Colosseum. One of Elaine laughing next to our mom, while Ben stood off to the side looking smug. Like the proud host. Like the guy who pulled it all together. Like the guy who thought, yeah, screw Mark. He won't care. What would you do if your own brother excluded you from a once-in-a-lifetime family trip that you helped pay for? Would you forgive, or do what I did? Because the more I thought about it, the more it all started to line up. The way Ben had been acting lately, more aloof, distant. I hadn't seen them in over a week, but that wasn't too unusual. I figured they were just working or tired. Carrie had said something vague about needing space when we last talked. They must have been planning this for months. Behind my back. Booking flights, group chats, arrangements, all while using the electricity I paid for and sleeping in beds I furnished. While I was here, doing grocery runs and working my ass off, I went to the door of the condo, the one I technically own but haven't really lived in since Ben moved in. It hit me all at once. How long I'd been accommodating them, how I'd let this slow erosion of respect and boundaries creep in. I'd told myself I was being the bigger man, the good brother. That's what older siblings do, right? We take on the burden so they don't have to. We cover the costs, we let shit slide, we swallow the disrespect in small, bite-sized pieces until suddenly you're choking on the whole thing. I pulled up my security app. I looked at the smart lock system ID installed a year ago. Never really used the admin controls, never needed to. But it took me less than 2 minutes to revoke their key codes. I stood there, holding my phone, breathing in deep. I expected to feel guilt, or something close to it. Maybe a pang of second-guessing. But what I felt was clean. It felt like wiping something dirty off your skin that you didn't even know had been there for too long. And that's the part that really stuck with me. Not the betrayal, not the pettiness, just the fact that the moment I hit deactivate, I didn't feel cruel. I felt free. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept flipping back and forth in my head, trying to justify things that had no real defense. Like how I once lent Ben $5,000 for a car repair, but then noticed Carrie's new iPad the next week. Or how he forgot my birthday last year and sent a text the day after that just said, "Hope you had fun, bro." I kept remembering how Mom always said, "Ben's just sensitive. You have to lead with love." But love doesn't plan a cruise without you. Love doesn't erase you from the family group photo and act like it's fine. The next morning, I went into work like nothing happened. Nobody there knew a damn thing, and I didn't tell them. What would I say anyway? My leech of a brother took our entire family on a luxury cruise without me, and I'm realizing I'm the only one who's been holding everything together for years. That kind of line gets you either pitted or mocked. I kept it all in. Just drank my coffee, did my code reviews, and came home to the emptiest house I've ever loved. And then, just after 8 that night, my neighbor Greg texted me. Greg's a good guy, ex-Navy, always mowing his lawn like it's a competition. He said, "Hey Mark, your bro and his wife are back. They've been at the door for a while. Looks like they're locked out." I stared at the message. I didn't move for a long minute. Then I poured myself another drink. I didn't reply to Greg, didn't call Ben. I just sat in that silence and let the weight of it all finally settle on someone else's shoulders for a change. The locks were changed. The doors were closed. And maybe, just maybe, so was the chapter where I kept pretending this family still gave a damn about me. You don't wake up one morning and decide to let your brother and his wife move into your place for free. It happens slowly, like a leak behind drywall, one drip at a time, until the whole damn thing rots from the inside and you're left wondering how you missed it. It started with something small, like most disasters do. Ben called me one night, voice shaky in that way he gets when he's trying to sound chill, but is clearly drowning in his own mess. "Hey man, do you know a good plumber?" he asked, and I should have known right then that it was going to turn into something bigger. A week later, they were at my door with boxes. Not a lot, just enough to make it seem like they were staying for a few nights until the mold clears out. That mold, by the way, turned into a full-scale eviction. Long story short, they'd stopped paying rent 6 months earlier, arguing with the landlord over something to do with repairs he refused to make. Then spun the whole thing into a morality play, how they were the victims of a crooked system, how Carrie's health was at risk, how he couldn't catch a break since the pandemic. I nodded through it all, holding the front door open like an idiot, not even asking for a move-out timeline. Because that's what brothers do, right? At first, it was fine. They were polite. They cooked dinner sometimes. Carrie even bought me a plant I didn't want, but I kept it anyway because she smiled like it meant something. But little by little, things started to slide. It wasn't malicious, not at first. It was more like a slow erosion of boundaries. They started using the master bedroom, even though I told them to stick to the guest room. Ben said the bed was better for his back, which sounded like bullshit, but I let it go. Then they started having packages delivered in their names. Then their dog showed up, an anxious little mop of a thing that barked at everything and pissed on the kitchen mat. But what was I gonna do, throw them out? Every time I thought about confronting them, some memory would pop up of when we were kids, Ben scraping his knee and looking to me for help, or those summers when Dad was still alive and we'd stay up late watching rented VHS tapes, laughing about nothing. I kept telling myself this was temporary, that they just needed a place to land. But months turned into a year, and then 2, and then 4, and somewhere in between, I stopped referring to it as my condo and started calling it home again in the most detached, passive way. Because it wasn't mine anymore, not really. It was a free Airbnb with no checkout date. Carrie was always the diplomat. She'd leave little thank you notes after they used something of mine or bake cookies when the air got thick with tension. But behind the sweetness, I always felt this unspoken smugness, like she knew they were getting away with something and figured as long as she smiled enough, I wouldn't say anything. And she was right. For too long, she was right. Even when Ben's job hunt turned into a vague story about consulting, even when they stopped cleaning up after themselves, even when I came home one night and found their friends watching football in my living room like it was theirs, I kept swallowing it. Because family. And then came the expenses. Oh man, the quiet little bills that showed up without a sound. The utility bill doubled, then tripled. Groceries vanished faster than I could replace them. I mentioned it once. Ben said they'd totally cover it, but of course, they never did. I was making good money, so I kept telling myself it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered every time I opened the fridge and saw their leftovers, or walked into the bathroom and found Carrie's damn hair extensions clogging the drain again. It mattered when I'd come home exhausted from work and find them sprawled on the couch, watching Netflix on my account, acting like they were the ones doing me a favor by keeping the place lively. The worst part? I started resenting myself more than them. Because I knew what was happening. I saw it clearly, but I didn't act. I didn't speak. I just let the pressure build, hoping some future version of me would have the spine to deal with it. That version finally showed up, but it took a cruise without a text to get him here. So when Greg texted me that they were back, standing outside the condo with their bags and their vacation glow and probably still smelling like overpriced sunscreen and Greek wine, I didn't move. I didn't even stand up from the couch. I watched my phone buzz on the table like it was someone else's problem. First, a missed call. Then another. Then Ben left a voicemail, which I didn't listen to until later that night, when I was brushing my teeth and feeling a little too calm for what I'd just done. His voice was tense, not quite yelling but close. Dude, seriously? What the hell is this? We get back from a family trip and the locks don't work? I mean, are you trying to be dramatic? Is this some kind of joke? He didn't apologize. Not once. Didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't say he missed me. Just assumed I'd lost my mind. Like I was the irrational one for finally slamming a door they'd been kicking wide open for 4 damn years. I didn't answer. I didn't call back. I went to bed with the lights off, the condo finally silent, and for the first time in a long while, the space actually felt like it belonged to me again. Elaine didn't call right away, and I figured she wouldn't, not because she didn't care, but because that's her way, always waiting for the dust to settle while pretending like nothing is on fire. But after a couple of days of silence, after I'd ignored every call from Ben and every vague text Carrie had the nerve to send about clearing things up, Elaine finally popped up on my phone screen with that familiar little "Hey, got a minute?" And I stared at it, standing in my kitchen, wondering if she was calling as my sister or as their unofficial spokesperson. I picked up, mostly out of curiosity, because part of me wanted to hear her dance around the obvious. Her voice was warm, hesitant, the kind of cautious tone someone uses when they're about to ask you not to explode. "Mark," she said, "I've been meaning to call you. Things got a little out of hand, didn't they?" Out of hand. That's how she phrased it. Like this was some awkward dinner where I got a little too loud over politics. Not a full-scale betrayal orchestrated by the people I used to call family. I didn't say anything for a few seconds, just let the silence hang like wet laundry in the air between us. She filled it, of course. That's Elaine's specialty, patching gaps with words no one asked for. "We didn't mean to leave you out," she said, as if saying it out loud would soften the blow. It just kind of happened. Ben was organizing everything and, well, he said you probably wouldn't want to come. That line hit harder than I thought it would. Not because it was surprising, but because of how easy it came out of her mouth. Like they'd practiced it. Like it was the party line they'd all agreed to. "He said I wouldn't want to come?" I repeated, slow and sharp, like I was testing the shape of it in my mouth. She sighed. God, that sigh. Elaine's been sighing like that since we were kids, always acting like she's the one carrying the weight while the rest of us make things harder. "He said cruises aren't your thing," she continued, like that justified everything. "And that you'd probably be working anyway. You always say how busy you are." I felt something low in my gut twist. Not anger exactly, but that dull ache that comes from being misunderstood by people who should know better. I hadn't taken a real vacation in over 5 years. Not because I didn't want to, but because I'd been carrying too many damn people on my back. Because every time I tried to plan something for myself, some emergency came up. Ben's car broke down, Carrie had a dental bill, Mom needed help with her taxes, and guess who always stepped in? I leaned against the counter, staring at the empty living room that still had their throw blankets on my couch, their clutter in corners I hadn't gotten around to cleaning. "Did you think I wouldn't want to come?" I asked her, genuinely curious now, wanting to know just how deep this thing went. Elaine paused, and that pause told me everything. I thought it was strange, she finally said, which was code for yes, but I didn't push back because it was easier to just go along with it. But Ben made it sound like you'd just be annoyed the whole time. He said the crowds and the heat and the family drama would make you miserable. I laughed, dry and humorless, because of course he did. That's how Ben's always framed me, like I'm this grumpy, isolated curmudgeon who hates fun and needs to be protected from his own misery. And you know what? Sometimes I am grumpy. Sometimes I don't want to be around noise and small talk and fake smiles. But I'd never turn down a chance to see Rome with my mother, or watch the sunset over the sea with my sister, or just feel like I still had a place at the goddamn table. He decided that for me? I asked, voice tightening. Without even asking? He thought he was doing you a favor, she said, and I could tell she was trying to smooth it over, even as the cracks were starting to show. You know how he is. He thinks he knows what's best. I was about to respond, to tell her that Ben always thinks he knows what's best, as long as it benefits him, when she dropped something else, casually, like it was just a footnote in this whole mess. And Carrie, well, she said some things that probably didn't help. I went cold. What things? Elaine hesitated again, which meant she wasn't sure if she should say it or if she just didn't want to be the messenger anymore. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook. Not this time. She told Ben that maybe it was better not to invite you, she finally said. That you've been kind of toxic lately. That it's always tense around you. Toxic. That word hit like a slap. Not because I've never been difficult, hell, I know I can be a lot, but because it came from Carrie. The woman who lived under my roof, who used my air conditioning, who drank my coffee and left lipstick-stained mugs in my sink. The woman who smiled in my face while telling my family behind my back that I was a problem to be avoided. I didn't yell. I didn't hang up. I just stood there, letting it all sink in like water through concrete. Elaine was still talking, still trying to walk it back, but I'd stopped listening to the words. All I could hear was the truth finally settling in, loud and unignorable. This wasn't just an oversight, it was a decision. A series of small, cowardly decisions made by people who didn't have the guts to tell me the truth to my face. I told Elaine I needed to go. I didn't tell her I was done trying to earn my seat at a table that clearly didn't want me. And as I ended the call, all I could think about was how being excluded out of so-called concern is just a nicer way to be erased. That night, Ben called again. I didn't pick up. I stared at the phone as it buzzed and thought, this time, let him sit in the silence for a while. There's a strange kind of anger that doesn't explode all at once, but builds in the corners of your mind, stacking up like clutter in an attic until one day, you find yourself buried in boxes you didn't even know you kept. That was me the morning after Elaine's call. I woke up early, earlier than usual for a weekend. Not because I had anything urgent to do, but because my body wouldn't let me sleep through the weight of it anymore. My mind had already started making a list before my feet even hit the floor, a mental tally of every little thing I'd done for Ben over the years that I'd shrugged off at the time as no big deal. But it was a big deal. Every one of them. And now, in the silence of a condo that finally felt like mine again, I started writing them down. Not because I wanted revenge or needed proof, but because I finally needed to see it for myself, just how long I'd been feeding this bottomless pit of a relationship. The first entry on the list was the down payment on his first car, back when he was 23 and swore up and down that he'd pay me back within 6 months. He never did. He even totaled the damn thing a year later, while speeding through a yellow light, and somehow I ended up being the one who helped him find a lawyer to fight the ticket. Then there was the time I covered his half of Mom's medical bills when she needed minor surgery and Ben was between jobs, even though 2 weeks later he was posting pictures from some festival in Arizona with Carrie and a group of friends I didn't recognize. I remembered the rent he couldn't pay during that rough patch in 2010, which turned into 2 years of living on my couch before he got back on his feet, though somehow I never saw him actually stand on his own. There was the time I paid for Carrie's dental surgery because their insurance had lapsed, and she couldn't eat solid food for 2 weeks. She texted me a thank you and never brought it up again. No one did. It became just another quiet sacrifice folded into the background of our family narrative, where I played the role of the dependable one, the safe harbor, the fallback plan. I opened my old laptop, digging through email threads and PayPal receipts, and there it was, all of it. Gas money, plane tickets, utilities, vet bills for their neurotic little dog. Hundreds of dollars here, thousands there. I found a screenshot of a Venmo payment I sent for their emergency storage unit when they were in between apartments, and another of a hotel booking I made for their anniversary trip 3 years ago. Because Ben's card got declined the morning they were supposed to leave. He'd promised to pay me back as soon as his bonus came in. I never saw a cent. The list grew longer than I expected. Not just in dollars, but in favors, in phone calls answered at 2 in the morning, in missed vacations, in weekends lost helping them move, or paint, or fix shit they should have handled themselves. It was a record of a man slowly giving away parts of his life under the illusion that it was just what family does. And the worst part? I didn't do any of it with resentment at the time. I did it out of some misplaced belief that my role in this family was to be the reliable one, the guy who never needed help, the man who just handled things. But now all those pieces I gave away felt stolen. Not because they were taken, but because no one ever even remembered that I gave them. They were used and forgotten, chalked up to the invisible labor of the oldest sibling, the one who always seems fine so nobody bothers to check if he's not. I read through an old group text thread from 3 Christmases ago where I covered the entire holiday dinner, and all I got in return was a thumbs-up emoji from Carrie and a half-hearted "appreciate it bro" from Ben. By the time noon rolled around, I was neck-deep in receipts and screenshots and messages, and I didn't feel better. I felt exposed. Like I'd finally opened the ledger on a business that had been bleeding money for years, and now I couldn't unsee the hole I'd let them dig under me. That's when the front desk at my office buzzed. I wasn't even supposed to be there, but I'd gone in to clear my head, to put some space between me and the ghosts of my generosity. I answered the line, expecting a delivery or maybe someone from the building's management. Instead, it was Sharon, the receptionist, her voice tight with that polite discomfort reserved for unexpected guests. "Mark, there's a woman here asking for you. She says it's Carrie?" I froze for a second, caught between disbelief and irritation. Of course she came here. Of course she couldn't respect even this last bit of space. I told Sharon to send her up, already dreading the encounter, the inevitable tears, the manipulative apology, or worse, the passive-aggressive version of it where she made herself the victim and I was the unreasonable monster who'd slammed the door on family. As the elevator chimed and the doors slid open, I stood by my desk, my heart oddly calm. Not cold, not angry, just still, like something in me had finally settled. I watched Carrie step into the office, dressed too nice for someone who should have been humiliated, carrying a small box in her hands like it was supposed to mean something. Maybe a peace offering. Maybe a trick. I didn't say anything. I waited. And she opened her mouth to speak. Carrie stood there in the middle of the office like she expected a warmer welcome, like maybe she thought the sight of her alone, holding that little cardboard box like it contained forgiveness, would disarm me instantly. She had this look on her face, part sorry, part defensive, part something else entirely that I couldn't name, but recognized from years of her carefully rehearsed sincerity. She always knew how to step into a room like the air should shift to accommodate her. Even now, after everything, she still had the nerve to act like she belonged in mine. I didn't speak right away. I just stared, waiting for her to explain herself, to say something real before I gave her the floor. Eventually, when the silence between us had stretched long enough to make her uncomfortable, she shifted her weight from one foot to the other and said softly, "I just wanted to talk." "That's all." I nodded toward the chair across from my desk, and she sat down like she thought it meant more than it did, like the gesture was some olive branch. But it wasn't that. It was just easier than standing. She opened the box and pulled out a few things, a coffee mug I'd forgotten I owned, a hoodie she claimed I left in the laundry room, and a small stack of mail, most of which had already been opened. Her hands trembled just enough for it to be noticeable, and for a second I wondered if that was real or part of the performance. She blinked more than usual, the way people do when they're trying not to cry too early. I waited. "We didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, her voice thin and soft like she was trying to fit the words into a shape I wouldn't throw back at her. "The trip, it wasn't personal. It really wasn't." I leaned back, letting the weight of that line sit between us like a smoke bomb that didn't quite go off. "Sure," I said, flat and tired. "A trip with everyone but me. Completely impersonal." She flinched like she wanted to argue, but knew better. Then thought, "He said you probably wouldn't want to go," she muttered, like repeating the party line one more time might somehow shift the truth. "He said you hate crowds, that you just complain the whole time." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I was tired of hearing the same excuses dressed up in different clothes. "You know what I hate more than crowds?" I asked her, voice calm but sharp. "Being erased." That hit. I saw it. She bit her lip, then looked away, then finally let the tears fall, soft and controlled, like she'd practiced crying in front of a mirror. I don't know if they were real. Maybe they were. But I'd seen too many of her tears over the years to know they were always conveniently timed. "We miss you," she whispered. "Your family, Mark. This thing you're doing, it's not you." I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "Not me?" I said slowly. "Funny, because it feels exactly like me. Like the part of me you all pretended didn't exist. The part that finally got sick of being used." She shook her head quickly, a little too fast, like she needed to prove her sincerity by sheer motion. "We never used you," she said, almost offended. "You offered. You've always been generous. You never said no." "Exactly," I replied. "I didn't say no. And none of you ever asked if it was costing me anything to keep saying yes. You just assumed I'd always be there, that I'd keep the lights on, keep the fridge stocked, keep pretending like it was okay to be invisible as long as you all got what you wanted." She didn't know what to say to that. She sat there blinking, breathing hard through her nose, the tears still coming but slower now, like her reservoir was running low. "You changed the locks," she said finally, like it was a war crime. "We came back from vacation and the door wouldn't open. Do you know how humiliating that was?" I stared at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. "I do. I know exactly how humiliating it feels to be shut out of something that's supposed to include you." She looked down at her hands, silent now, no more arguments ready. She knew. Whether she admitted it or not, she knew they'd gone too far. That they'd pushed me past the line I didn't even know I had. And now they were shocked that the man who held everything together for years had finally let it fall apart. "You'll regret this," she said suddenly, standing with a jolt, her voice tight and shaking. "We're all you've got." That one landed like a slap, not because it was true, but because it used to be. For a long time, I really believed it. That no matter how one-sided things got, no matter how much they took or how little they gave, at least we were still family. At least I had them. But the truth is, I've been alone for years. I just didn't want to face it until now. "I'd rather be alone than feel like this again," I told her quietly, and for the first time, she didn't have anything to say back. She picked up the box, now half empty, and walked to the door. She didn't slam it. She didn't turn around. She just walked out, and I stood there in the silence she left behind, breathing easier than I had in a long time. It was 3 days after Carrie walked out of my office with her neatly packed guilt box and the desperate parting shot still ringing in my ears when Elaine finally called again. Only this time her tone wasn't quiet or cautious or wrapped in soft-spoken diplomacy like usual. It was sharp, irritated, and most surprising of all, not directed at me. I was sitting in the parking lot outside the grocery store, debating whether to go in or just live off crackers and bourbon for the weekend, when her name lit up my phone. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the answer button, wondering if I was ready to hear more half-truths or excuses. But something about the timing, or maybe just the raw memory of Carrie's last words, made me tap accept without overthinking it. She skipped right over the pleasantries. "Did you tell Ben you didn't want to come on the cruise?" she asked, her voice sharp enough to cut through my half-awake brain fog. "No, how are you? No, do you have a second? Just straight to the point." I blinked, gripping the steering wheel with my free hand as if bracing for a sudden swerve. "No," I said, slow and clear. "I never even knew there was a cruise." There was silence on her end for a second or two, and then she let out this low, humorless laugh, the kind of laugh that means someone just realized they've been played. "That little shit," she muttered, more to herself than to me. "He told everyone you said no. He told Mom you weren't interested, told me you didn't want to be around family drama. Said you were too busy or too over it to even consider joining." I didn't say anything at first. I just stared out at the people walking into the store, couples and old men and moms wrangling toddlers, all of them living lives that didn't feel quite as messy or hollow as mine did in that moment. I wasn't surprised by Ben's lie, disappointed, sure, but surprised? Not even a little. Of course he said I refused. It made everything easier. It let him keep the spotlight without having to explain the empty seat. It made him look like the good guy, the one who tried, while I got cast as the grumpy loner who couldn't be bothered. "Did you believe him?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. Elaine hesitated, and that hesitation said more than any words could have. "I wanted to," she admitted. "It sounded like something you might say. You've skipped a lot of family stuff lately." I figured maybe this was just more of the same. There it was, the invisible armor people wrap around their assumptions. Because I've been distant, because I've been quiet, because I've drawn boundaries no one liked, it made the lie easier to swallow. I'd been painted as difficult, and once that label sticks, people stop questioning the story. You become the scapegoat for everyone's discomfort. The burden shifts neatly off their backs and onto yours. You're not excluded, you're avoiding. You're not forgotten, you're too busy. You're not hurt, you're just difficult. Elaine sounded genuinely pissed now, and I knew the anger wasn't about me being left out anymore. It was about being lied to, about realizing she'd been complicit in something ugly without even knowing. "I told him I wanted to call you, remember?" she said. "He told me not to. Said you were in a mood lately and didn't need any more pressure." I exhaled through my nose, that bitter breath that doesn't come with relief but some dull sense of confirmation. Ben had weaponized my silence, my solitude, my need for peace. He'd turned all the reasons I stepped back into reasons to keep me out. "So he built the lie with everyone's help," I said. "And no one noticed until it was too late." "I noticed the second we boarded the ship," Elaine said. I looked around and thought, this feels wrong. And it was. The whole damn trip was wrong. I leaned back in the seat, staring up at the car ceiling like it might offer some clarity. "Then why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "Why wait until now?" Her voice cracked a little, and for once it wasn't a performance. "Because I didn't want to believe he'd do that to you," she said. "To us. I thought if we just got through the week, maybe it'd smooth itself over." I didn't have the energy to tell her that nothing smooths over without someone doing the work. And for once, that someone wasn't going to be me. She cleared her throat, trying to recenter the conversation. "Mom wants to talk to you," she said next. "She's been calling me every day. She wants to mediate or whatever she thinks that means." I almost laughed, but it came out flat and humorless. "Mom doesn't even know what she's mediating," I said. "She just wants the illusion of peace. She wants us back together," Elaine replied, and there was that soft tremble in her voice again, the one that always showed up when she was trying to convince herself of something more than she was trying to convince me. "She wants us to move on." "Moving on means accepting what happened," I said. "It doesn't mean pretending it didn't." She didn't argue. She just sighed again, quieter this time, like she finally understood that nothing she could say would reverse what had already fractured. "I told her you might not be ready," she whispered. I closed my eyes and let the silence fill the car again. For once, I didn't feel guilty about it. "I'm not," I said, and hung up. It was a Thursday evening when Ben finally showed up in person. No warning, no text, no call, just the sound of a knock at the door that landed heavy and slow, like someone trying to convince themselves they still had a right to be on the other side. I knew it was him even before I checked the peephole. That kind of hesitation only comes from someone who's unsure whether they'll be welcomed or turned away. I stood there for a long second, my hand on the doorknob, wondering if I even wanted to do this. If opening that door meant letting old patterns slither back in, or if maybe, just maybe, I was finally strong enough to face them down without folding. I opened it. Ben stood there in jeans and a faded t-shirt, his face tan from the cruise sun, but somehow already losing that vacation glow. His eyes were puffy like he hadn't slept right in days, and his shoulders slumped a little lower than usual, like even he was starting to feel the weight of what he'd built with his lies. Carrie stood behind him, her hand looped around his arm, not saying anything, just watching with that unreadable look she always wore when she wanted to seem innocent, but wasn't quite sure if she'd be believed. "I figured you'd open," Ben said, voice low, like he was trying to keep this from becoming something louder than it needed to be. I stepped aside without a word and let them in, not because I owed them anything, but because I needed to see if they'd finally say what mattered, or if this was just another attempt to rewrite the story in their favor. He walked slowly into the condo, like he was a guest in a hotel lobby, glancing around as if things had changed. They hadn't. Not really. But maybe he could sense something different in the air, the absence of guilt, the lack of patience, the quiet warning that I wasn't the man he used to manipulate. He didn't sit. Neither did I. "So this is what it comes to?" he asked, finally breaking the silence, looking around like he expected someone else to jump out and make this easier. "Changing the locks?" "Ice cold, man. Real mature." "I didn't change them," I said. "I revoked access." "Subtle difference. One's mechanical. The other's personal." Ben smirked, but it didn't have the bite it used to. "You've always had a thing for words," he said. "Still doesn't make it any less messed up." I crossed my arms, leaning back slightly against the counter. "You want to talk about what's messed up, or are we just here to pretend this is about a door?" He looked down for a second, then back at me, this flicker in his eyes like maybe he was about to crack open, maybe he was going to say what he should have said the day they boarded that ship. But of course, that's not what happened. "You think you're better than us because you've got money," he said, and there it was, the core of it, the resentment that had been simmering under everything since the day I started making more than him. He said it with a sneer, but underneath it was the same old whining insecurity he never outgrew, the same belief that I'd somehow abandoned him just by succeeding. "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm better than someone who lies to his mother." He flinched, and Carrie's grip on his arm tightened like she wanted him to shut up, or maybe she just didn't want to watch him lose whatever ground he thought he had. "You told everyone I refused to come," I continued, calm but direct. "You made up a version of me that was easier to leave behind. And you did it not because I was difficult, but because you didn't want to feel guilty about cutting me out." "It wasn't like that," he muttered, but even he didn't sound convinced. "Then tell me how it was," I said. "Tell me what part of that story I've got wrong." He didn't answer. He just looked away, his jaw tight, his mouth moving like he wanted to shape some kind of defense, but couldn't find the words that wouldn't immediately collapse under the weight of the truth. Carrie finally stepped forward, like she couldn't stand the silence anymore. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she said, but there was no conviction in it. "Just tired regret. It got away from us. Things happened fast." "Things don't happen fast," I said. "Choices happen. Lies happen. You both made a choice. You chose to exclude me. You chose to talk about me like I was a burden instead of a brother. And then you tried to spin it like you were protecting me from something I never asked to be protected from." Ben rubbed the back of his neck, still not meeting my eyes. "We were trying to keep the peace," he said finally, and it might have been the most honest thing he'd said all year. "No," I replied. "You were trying to avoid consequences. There's a difference." The room went still again, the air heavy with the weight of everything we hadn't said for years. All the jokes I laughed at even when they were at my expense. All the favors I offered without being asked. All the times I let myself get walked over because I thought that's what love looked like when you were raised to believe family meant unconditional tolerance. I saw it on his face then, that brief flicker of understanding, the recognition that he hadn't just hurt me with this one trip, but with a lifetime of taking me for granted. But it passed quickly, and he closed himself off again, folding into the safety of denial. He turned to Carrie. "Let's go." She nodded, her eyes glancing toward me one last time like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Maybe she knew it wouldn't make a difference. Maybe she was done pretending too. They walked toward the door. Ben opened it and stepped out first, and Carrie followed, taking his hand just before they disappeared down the hallway. They didn't look back. And I didn't ask them to. There's a peculiar kind of quiet that follows a long fight, the kind that doesn't feel like peace, but more like an aftershock, like the ground still deciding whether or not to split open again beneath your feet. That's the silence I've been living in ever since Ben and Carrie walked out of the condo without looking back. Not the good kind of silence that comes with calm or contentment, but the kind that hums low in your chest like an unanswered question you can't stop hearing, even when the noise is gone. It's not loud, but it lingers. It lingers in the spaces they used to fill without permission, in the dent on the couch cushion where Ben always sat, in the chipped coffee mug that Carrie left in the sink, in the faint scent of someone else's shampoo clinging to the bathroom air like a reminder that this place hasn't been just mine for a long, long time. I walk from room to room now sometimes, not because I need anything, but because I can. I leave doors open that I used to close out of habit. I run the dishwasher with half a load. I play music through the speakers without worrying if it'll interrupt anyone's nap or yoga or FaceTime call. The condo is clean, finally, physically clean at least, but it doesn't feel whole. It feels like a place after the storm where the sky's gone clear, but everything still smells like wetwood and broken promises. I ask myself a lot now if I went too far, if changing the locks was too much, if holding the line, finally, after years of letting it get pushed and pushed, somehow makes me the villain in this story. Because that's the thing they don't tell you about boundaries. Setting them doesn't feel heroic, not when it's your own family on the other side. It feels cold. It feels unnatural. It feels like you've set fire to a bridge while still standing close enough to feel the heat on your skin. And yet, I can't bring myself to walk it back. Not even a little. Sometimes I check my phone late at night, not expecting anything but still hoping for something, a message, a voicemail, even a half-assed apology dressed up in sarcasm. But there's nothing. Just the same recycled group texts from Mom, ones where she pretends everything is fine and slips in lines like, "We should all have dinner soon," as if pretending hard enough will erase what actually happened. I never reply. Not because I want to be cruel, but because I don't know how to be honest without setting off another explosion. And I'm tired of being the only one who takes the fallout seriously. I've replayed every conversation in my head more times than I can count. Every moment where I should have said something earlier. Every quiet moment I let slide to keep the peace that wasn't really peace at all. I think about all the holidays I hosted where I ended up doing the dishes alone. All the birthdays I remembered when no one remembered mine. All the money I gave that was received like it came from some faceless machine, not from a person with a limit and a heart. I think about the moment I watched them walk away, Ben's face tight with defensiveness, Carrie's hand looped through his like she still believed they were the victims here, and I wonder if they'll ever understand how deeply they carved the final wound. And still, part of me misses them. That's the honest truth. I miss the background noise, the smell of breakfast I didn't make, the way Carrie hummed to herself when she thought no one was listening. I miss having someone to talk to after a long day, even if most of the time it was just surface-level nonsense. I miss my brother, not the man he became, but the boy he used to be, the one who shared his Halloween candy with me even when I took the bigger pillow fort. I miss the feeling that I was needed, even if that need was often manipulative and lopsided and unspoken. But I don't miss being invisible in my own home. I don't miss the guilt trips disguised as gratitude, or the way Ben talked over me in front of Mom like I was the problem and he was the solution. I don't miss the little lies that built a wall between us brick by brick, each one laid with a smile and a casual shrug. I don't miss giving more than I had just to be met with silence when I finally needed something in return. People like to romanticize forgiveness like it's some magical cure for everything that's broken. But the truth is, forgiveness doesn't always heal, it just quiets the argument for a while. Sometimes not forgiving is the only way to tell yourself that your pain mattered, that your voice mattered, that your boundaries weren't just lines in the sand to be kicked aside every time someone else wanted more of you than you could give. And maybe that makes me bitter. Or maybe that makes me human. I still haven't heard from them. Not really. Just a few vague group texts from our mom. The locks are changed, but the part of me that still cares, that's harder to seal off. I've thought about calling them, not to fix things, but to tell them they were right about one thing. This did change everything. And maybe that's the most honest thing I can say. Because once you see clearly, you can't unsee. Once you stop lying to yourself, it's harder to swallow the lies from anyone else. Did I go too far? Maybe. But if you saw what I saw, lived what I lived, wouldn't you have done the same?